It's about history. It's about preservation. It's about sense of place here on Eastern Long Island. With Esperanza Leon, I'm Irwin Levy, and this is Our Hamptons. Esperanza.
Hello, Irwin.
Esperanza, circa 2001, there was a certain mayor of New York City who, for a period of time, was referred to as America's mayor. We know who we're talking about here, right? Okay. I'm here to refute that right now because this guy is America's mayor. Okay.
High praise.
This guy is America's mayor. And we're going to tell our audience this story and we're going to introduce him. And this is Mayor Gary Vegliante of the incorporated village of Westhampton Dunes. Gary, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the praise, but I appreciate it very much.
Well, it's our pleasure. And we're going to give, we're going to introduce Gary. Gary is, we're going to give him a little bit of a personal background before we jump right into this. First of all, I love Gary right away because, like me, he's from Queens originally. So
I was just going to say, I mean, it was
scores.
I bet you that's the reason you're here.
It scores major points, Esperanza. I'm sorry, I can't help it.
Forget everything else.
I can't help it. I do apologize. Esperanza's used to this by now, Gary. But so now you're from Astoria. Now, when you moved here, Gary, when did you move to Westhampton Dunes? Which I know it wasn't called that at the time, but did you move there full time? Or was it a summer house for you?
Actually, when we incorporated, there was no road.
Right.
So we had no utilities. There was no water, no electric.
Oh my goodness.
It was many years later that I made residence at 800 Dune Road, Cook Lane.
Okay. To give our audience a very, very brief background before we let Gary really tell us the story.
Yeah,
and I'm going to really, Esperanza, I'm going to really sum this up very quickly. Circa whenever this was, the mid 1990s. I'm really going to give the short version here because I want to let Gary tell the story. Basically, Westhampton, this section of what we now refer to as Westhampton Dunes, literally through a severe coastal storm, literally ceased to exist. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's really where this story starts. And this story, and it's funny, I'm almost going to go to the end before I go to the beginning, but you don't hear much about Westhampton Dunes now. But back then, it was enormous articles periodically in the New York Times. I mean, because of this incredible story of a village, of a place that really washed out to the point of inaccessibility that had to be brought back to life. So, Gary, tell us how this happened. And I'm going to give a quote that Gary did at the time, Esperanza, because this sort of sets the tone in addition to calling him America's mayor. After the Bible, this may very well be the greatest story ever told.
I was much younger then.
Yes, so was I. But Gary, tell us how this, give us the background here.
Irwin, it was really something. Claire and I were married in 1977, and we always spent time at the beach. We had friends up in the North Fork of Long Island, and we were always very interested in getting a home on the beach. So we would come out when we were spending time on the North Fork, and we bought a dog. We're newly married, we buy a dog, we have a house. And I bought my dog from a breeder here in Westhampton. So we'd come out, we'd put the dog at the breeders in Westhampton, and he would vacation on the South Fork, we would vacation on the North Fork. So the normal run would be we'd drop the dog off, we'd walk through the Westhampton Beach Village, look at all the realtors and say, someday, honey, I'm going to buy you a house.
Right.
And we came upon a house, a very sweet realtor, Susan Lichter, picked us up and started showing us homes here and on the North Shore. And we found this house on Cove Lane, fell in love with it, and I actually bought it. I actually agreed to buy it before Claire even saw it. She was at work. I was out here. Susie called me up and said, "You got to come out and look at this house. Just went on the market. It's going to sell right away." I think I was a bit optimistic because at that time the road was still in place.
Right.
The entire ocean side was washing away. So I drive down the road and I'm looking at these homes in all sorts of states of disrepair. And I say to myself, look, the government's got to help out here. This has got to come to an end. They can't let this island wash away.
Right.
I'll take the chance.
Now,
So
now,
you were
Gary, this
already
was when you
thinking that.
moved there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
This was what year when you moved there? Because this
In
was
85.
85.
Yeah, we bought it in 85 and it became, we actually, they closed the road by that November, right on time.
Oh, okay.
It
So,
was strategically well designed.
What
so
did your wife
Esperanza,
say?
the Esperanza, the storyline here is, so Gary gets there in 85. Literally, you know, I don't want to say Gary maybe was bad luck, but hey, I don't know. At least initially. But the road, so you bought a summer house and literally
Yeah.
right afterwards it was unusable.
Inaccessible. Yeah.
Unusable,
I-
inaccessible.
This Now, folks, our
Yeah,
Hamptons
one summer.
podcast audience, can you believe this? This is guy buys a house 1985, literally immediately can't use it. And so for this period of time, Gary, there was nothing. Like you just
Oh, there was a lot of something. It just wasn't access. You know, when we bought the house, we went into contract with very nice people, and they allowed us to stay in the home from July on. So we gave them a substantial down payment, and I said, look, if I can't close by fall, you can keep the down payment as a rental. They were perfectly fine with that. So we moved in. We were married in only well, about 10 years. We had no children.
right.
Moved into the home on the beach, and we spent the most beautiful summer out here one can imagine. We were blessed with our first son the
Right.
following March.
Okay. Okay. So
Yeah.
and then became, as you called it, inaccessible.
It got worse and worse.
Right.
If I can just situate first, because perhaps, and for myself as much as for our listeners, this is a barrier island, and it was at that time part of Westhampton Beach, or
No, it's part of Westhampton proper.
proper.
We're
Okay.
Southampton town.
Okay, still Sam. Okay, and just so we can really, I mean, you're going to tell this story, I'm sure, fully, or maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but this inaccessibility was being caused by what?
That's a very involved question. Well, the inaccessibility, well, we finally settled the lawsuit, but what actually occurred was there was a design project to maintain the barrier island, mostly east of us. East of us, the barrier island was eroding because of Shinnecock Inlet being stabilized. And on Long Island, the littoral flow of sand is out of the east towards the west. So once they interrupt that littoral flow, it stops the sand from coming down, and it gets worse as you go further down. So Westhampton Beach, where all the big homes, the condominiums, and some hotels were suffering severe erosion. So they were pleading with the government to come in and fix. The Army Corps came in and did a very extensive study, but it went on for many years, as a matter of fact, and it just got completed recently, called the Fire Island to Montauk Point study, a FIM study. And they designed a series of jetties or groins going out into the ocean. But it was designed to go from the western end of the Mauritius Inlet eastward, because with the westerly flow of sand, build on the west side, the sand would come down, fill that up, build the next one, sand would come down, fill it up. You'd be filling up the inlets as you're building the jetties. Now, the way the projects get done in those days especially was the Army Corps would design it, give it to the local government administration to administer. So it was designed by the Army Corps, given to the county of Suffolk to minister, they of course were being heavily lobbied, and in those days by the East End, and they issued the permits for the East End jetties to be put in first. I was not. This was in the late '60s, early '70s. I wasn't a part of the project at that time. No one believed that was the correct way to do it, but it got started. They started to build them. People, scientists, the Army Corps said, "Look, guys, you're going to destroy the west end of the village of the island." But at that time, the dynamics of the area was the west end of this barrier island was inhabited by strictly summer homes, basically blue collar America, cops, firemen, teachers, bar owners like myself at the time. And they kind of said, we'll get to it, don't worry about it. They started putting in the jetties, immediately started an erosive act where we had the largest beach in the Hamptons that was actually accreting at the rate of 1 foot per year, getting bigger every year. It went from that to losing hundreds of feet of sand in many homes.
And this was, they were, if I'm reading you correctly, Gary, what you're basically saying is they were sort of protecting the more, and I quote, valuable property at the expense of the less valuable property.
I would just say that part of the island had a much more efficient lobbying team.
Okay.
Right, the more
Okay.
affluent community
And-
that could afford it.
And
Yeah.
we should also say, and if you, I also want to, before we continue on,
Yeah.
there is an incredible film, and we have to just bring this out. We're getting a lot of the storyline, not only obviously from Mayor Gary Vegliante directly, but from Yale Nelson's really documentary
Yeah.
of the incredible journey, the story of Westhampton Dunes. And he, on this video, he illustrated exactly what you're talking about, the way they were building the jetties, the way the waters move. And also, I recall both from my own research and that movie, Gary, there was also a lot of typical bureaucratic bumbling, if you will, because for what amounted to pennies to do this right, they tried to save those pennies.
Well, they not only they tried to save the pennies, we just didn't have the profile that had the sex appeal to come in and help. So, for example, when the road first washed out, right after I spent my first summer here, they put up a barricade. And I said, "What are you guys doing?" They said, "Well, we got to protect you. There's an emergency situation." I said, "Well, it's an emergency. You got to deal with an emergency. You don't just stop people from going there." And it got very contentious because at the time, being part of Southampton, there was always a bit of friction between what Southampton voting public believed was summer people and the year-rounders. And so, of course, the elected officials, they tried to appeal to their voting base.
Right.
And we didn't get the attention we needed because it wasn't in the voting base behalf.
Right.
But so there's a lot of tension and a lot of controversy and a lot of nose-to-nose battles between us and what was going on.
So this was this 9-year period, we're going to call it from when you got there, when this happened, 85, up until the incorporation. We're going to get into the incorporation in just a minute, but basically you, and, it wasn't obviously just you, there was you and all of these countless number of homeowners that own this property that they just couldn't use, which led to the incorporation in 1994. And Esperanza, I got to give you this one quote from the New York Times article about this in 1994. And it's actually a quote, Gary Vegliante's own quote. "People say to me, 'What are you going to be the mayor of?' There's nothing out there." So, Esperanza, that's what they were dealing with. Mayor of what? A washed out, inaccessible, unusable
A community. Yeah.
Crazy.
Of seasonal homes. Is that what you would? Yeah.
Pretty much. Yeah, I would say there were very few. Well, once it washed away, there was none. But there were very few year-round residents. It was really was an incredible journey because as soon as I'll give you the background of what we did. We started to sue the federal. Well, as an individual, you cannot sue the federal government. So we created an organization called the Barrier Beach Preservation Association, which was a 501c3. And we were environmentally concerned about the bay and if this were to breach, how the salinity level of the bay would be damaged. And in fact, that occurred when it did breach. But we would be able to raise money then by asking for people's donations that would be tax deductible.
And that was
So-
predated the incorporation, Gary?
Oh, yes, quite a bit. It was
Okay.
predated my buying a home.
Okay.
I think it was, I think they formed that in 84. I bought in 85 or 86.
Okay.
Immediately got me involved.
So this was a struggle that was already
Yeah.
occur. Yes, yes.
So we retained an attorney, and John O'Connell was a wonderful guy, just a terrific guy, very bright federal attorney, and he really took the banner up and started the litigation. So myself and other members of the BBPA board would go up and down the road while there was a road to go up
Right.
and down, and we knock on doors and say, "Look, could you join the BBPA? We need the money to pursue the lawsuit." And for a while, it was working all right, but really, as things got more and more desperate and more and more homes fell in, people would look at me and say, "Look, what can I do? I could sit. I don't have to give you anything because if you were to win, which I don't think you got a shot at doing, if you were to win, they have to fix the beach, and I'm spending money. But if you lose, I didn't lose anything." I said, "But guys, first of all, this is a travesty of government. They're abusing us because we don't have the ability to fight. We can't allow that to happen."
Right.
And they smile, and some people write a check, and some people just kick me in the butt.
Right. And to Gary's point, Esperanza, when he says homes were falling in the water, I mean, they were literally falling in the water.
Literally floating away. Yeah,
The
I
houses were
understand.
falling in the water
Ensuing
and
storms and
Yeah.
so forth would
Yeah.
just wash them out. Yeah.
because this land was, I guess at this point, so compromised that even a less severe storm was just causing crazy
Oh, sure.
damage.
Nor'easters.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, one after the other. There was one point in the history of the village when we have a phone-in hotline, and it was like it reminded because I'm a kid in the Vietnam era, where they would read off, how many kills there were, how many American soldiers were lost, and where it had the dead list of homes.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
last night, 744 went in the row.
Oh my.
Fell in. 743 fell in. 789 fell in. And every day we call them. People call me up and say, "Gary, is it true my house fell in?" I said, "Look, I'm sorry to say, but I got the report. Yes."
And Gary, these calls you were fielding, again, just so I want to make it clear to our audience, this actually predated the incorporation.
Oh, yeah.
This was with that other organization. So,
BBPA, huh?
right. Okay. So just now to fast forward this a little bit. So Esperanza, these homeowners were just, I mean, to use the word suffering doesn't even,
Absolutely.
it's beyond suffering. I mean,
Yeah,
could you
with
imagine
yeah.
your home just
And
falling away? So,
we got very little support from the town. We would come out to our homes in the spring and they'd be vandalized, bruised, beaten, terrible things they would do. They'd steal our TVs, just tear up the couches. The village was inundated with vandals. And while we were not permitted to go to our homes,
right.
yeah,
The vandals were accessing it, I guess, via water, from,
Yeah, yeah.
coming on a boat or whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
Wow.
just unbelievable. So this sort of led up to 1994 when you officially incorporated. And Gary, now you were a layperson, obviously. You didn't,
Yep.
you don't have you owned a bar. You were a guy from Queens that owned a bar. You didn't know, you weren't, it's just, the story is unbelievable.
Not a career politician, in other
Not
words.
Not a career politician.
Thank
at
you.
all.
We need the voice of reason,
Although
Esperanza.
I'm the longest sitting mayor on Long Island.
Exactly.
Well, now you are a career
Yes.
politician.
Right, but the point was, this was not a career politician, going from one thing. This was a regular guy from Queens that
Regular
bought
guy.
a house. It was his dream house,
Right.
and he sees the rain. So,
I couldn't
tell us how this whole thing went down. How a bunch of you and your trustees, who I assume
Right.
were the same kind of people without government background.
My first set of trustees was a cop, a dry cleaner, a bowling alley guy, and a sheetrock drywall guy.
I mean,
Four of the greatest guys around.
God, what a
But
Esperanza, do we love this story?
well, you know, I wasn't used to borrowing. I was a jeweler by trade. My father was a jeweler, and I was a teacher also. I taught special ed
Right.
in Queens.
We weren't impugning the bar owner
Oh,
thing at
no,
all.
no,
It was just, it
I
just
just want to give you a
No,
general
but
idea.
you
made
are
for a good
man
storyline.
with many
Yeah.
hats and many talents.
Right. So,
Truly.
I don't know how talented I was, but I
and
was doing them.
and I remember the bowling alley. The bowling alley was in Farmingdale, Long Island, Esperanza, because they actually held meetings at the
I was
bowling
just going
alley.
to say you would meet at the bowling alley.
You know,
Yeah.
just phenomenal
Truly
story.
grassroots, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you and the four other trustees, five regular, normal Americans,
Yep.
just forged together, united a community, and I mean, to say you fought City Hall is an understatement.
We fought county hall, city hall, state hall, and federal government. We had a
Amazing.
$300 million litigation going.
Right.
It was $300 million against originally the county because we can only sue as individuals the next level of government. We could have incorporated Southampton in it, but we didn't do that. We wanted to go because the county was really involved in misplacing those jetties.
Right.
And then and it went on from there. What happened was John O'Connell, as I said, was our attorney, and he was a wonderful guy. We raised enough money to retain him and to continue the lawsuit to some extent. But the federal government's tactic, as well as the state government's tactic, was delay, delay, delay.
Right.
These guys will run out of money, and we'll accommodate the state. The state wanted the property to make it a park, and we'll just condemn it all out. And these guys they'll be out of our hair.
Right.
And I just couldn't accept that. I just could not accept that.
Right.
So we held these rallies. I'll never forget one night, we would often have a meeting in Manhattan because most of our residents lived in the 5 boroughs.
Right.
We'd get a location in Manhattan. We used to do it at the Gramercy Park Hotel. We could rent a room fairly reasonably. We get everybody together, and I'm telling them, you know, I'm hosting the meeting. I'm saying, we're going to do this, and we're about to do that, and we're going into court with this, we're going into that. And I'm telling them all about these things. Now, give me $500, and we'll keep this up. So I'm driving home, and Claire says to me, you know, honey, why didn't you tell me all that was going on? I had no idea. I said, sweetheart, I was making that up from the minute I opened my mouth. None of that's going on. But what was I going to say?
Right.
You know, we're sinking, and there's nothing we can do about it. But that was one of the funnier parts. So when we really where we were in 1992, we had fought the battle with the federal government and state for 11 or 12 years, actually about 14 years before I got there. And we were absolutely out of money. We owed John O'Connell's firm about $750,000.
Oh my gosh.
There was no way we could ever pay this. John had convinced his partners that it was worth the shot, but he was at the point where my partners are telling me, we can't do any more, Gary. This case is getting too big. I said, but John, this is the opportunity to win a case
Right.
of landmark status nationwide. He says, I know, I understand, I feel for you guys, I understand what's going on, but unless you get more money, it's over. I said, well, we'll see. Don't worry, I'm going to get back. I'll get money together. So it was pretty much the death knell. We were like, I was sitting at home and saying, my God, we're dead. There's nothing
Right.
we can do. And one Sunday morning, Claire and I are sitting on our back porch, and I'm reading Newsday, and I read that in New York State decided to pass a law, which is a very good law. Now that I've been a member of NICOM so long, I understand what they do. They encourage the state legislature to allow village mayors and village government to pass their delinquent tax debt over to the county. The county would then reimburse this village mayors for the tax debt, and in 3 years they would rent the property, because no mayor wants to be the guy to throw Mrs. Jones out of her home. So mayors were ignoring tax debt for many years, and people got abusive. They started paying the county tax, not paying the village tax, and abusing these village mayors. But we were sensitive to that. So they passed a law saying that the village government can then pass their tax debt to the county, and the county would take 3 years of notice and then rent the property. So I look at this, and we all knew, if we got this into trial, there'd be no doubt that we would win.
Right.
Because this was a general screw up. And if we got this in front of a judge, no judge would be able to say, no, they're not. They were definitely liable.
So incorporation was your way,
That was it.
was your way to wipe, really, that was the lane you had to take.
Absolutely. And the way that came about was I called John O'Connell and I said, John, listen, I got the answer to our prayers. Once we become a village, I have the right to tax everybody to pay your bill. And you're guaranteed that money because the tax bill has to be paid. And if it's not, we would take the property.
Right.
Of course, there wasn't anything to say. We forgot that part, but we went on, and because he knew he had the right case, and he knew we were really damaged by government.
But
So-
Esperanza, I have to interject for 1 second because, after the incorporation, this group of people, they weren't just government officials. You had Gary Vegliante, the mayor, on the truck rebuilding the road.
That's another
Yeah.
good story.
I mean, to save the money for the residents. Again, this is now the post incorporation, to actually repair the road. Gary Vegliante rebuilt Dune Road, okay, on the truck.
Actually, you're right, Irwin and myself, Bob Strecker, Charlie Brown, who was one of my
Right.
trustees, and George Asom. So we got what we decided we were going to incorporate. So I said to John O'Connell, John, you got to give me a lawyer to help me incorporate. He said, well, I'm a federal guy. I don't know. He says, I went to law school with a guy. He's on Long Island. Give him a call. Now, we had no money, none. And so I called this guy up. He said, oh, yeah, Mr. O'Connell told me all about it. Yeah, it's interesting. He said, I think it's possible. I think we'll be able to do it. I figure it's about $150,000 to $200,000. You can give me 100 down as a retainer, and we'll go from there. I said, well, thanks a lot. And I hang up the phone. There's no way I'm doing that.
Right.
I got another guy, a very similar story. I'm talking to a few people in my village. Somebody goes, I know this guy. He's a lawyer in Shoreham, New York. Very nice guy. He's a little tough to get along with. He has an odd personality of sorts, but he's a smart guy. And so I called Joe Prokop up. And as they said, he was a difficult guy sometimes to speak with. But he says to me, Gary, I've seen your story. My heart goes out to you. I really know. I said, Joe, I got to tell you something, guy. We are really tight. We have very little money left. He said, well, let me give it some thought. And he said, I think we can do it. It'll be the first time that an unoccupied island is going to have that many voters that can actually, inhabitants that can actually qualify. But let me see what I can do. He says, yeah, I thought it over. Figure about 75, that should do it. And if you come up with about half, maybe we can get that done. So I said, geez, that's a lot better than 150, 200,000. So he said, I said, well, Joe, let me see what I can do. I'll talk to a couple of my friends that I think I can raise that kind of money with, and we'll go back. He said, look, I really feel for you guys. So I'll tell you what, give me half of the 7,500 down, and I'll get it done. I just want one promise. I said, what would you like? He said, obviously, after we create a village, you'll become the first mayor. I'd like to serve as your village attorney for your first term. And after that, you're on your own if you continue to keep it. I said, Joe, I'll tell you what, you do it for $7,500 and you'll be my mayor, my attorney, as long as I'm mayor. To this day, he's still our attorney.
Hey, Esperanza, that's a win-win, right?
Right. Here I thought 75,000 and he meant 7,500.
We all did. I went on the phone. I almost burst out, So I say, hey, I'm writing him the check right now.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. But,
I'll talk to my board. I'll get you my
and this is after all of this went down, Esperanza, and I'm going to move the story up a little bit because we do have time constraints and I want to really try to get as much of this incredible story in. And I'm sort of chronicling this with some of these New York Times stories that, ran at the time. Now, when 1997, Esperanza, the headline in the New York Times, from the dunes a village emerges. Gary's smiling because he probably remembers the stories
I do.
and the headlines.
I do.
I mean, it was like Atlantis rising, Esperanza.
Right. Yes, yes, yes.
So Gary, like at this point, a lot of the work, I mean, the place was reborn. People were rebuilding their houses, everything, right?
When the breach occurred, we lost 190 of the 260 homes that were registered here. 190 of the homes fell into the ocean.
Wow.
The breach created an opening in the island over half a mile wide and 20 feet deep.
Wow.
And by 1997, it was incredibly vibrantly alive. You talk about when we built the road, we got to sell after we became a village in 1994, after nearly 14 years of litigation. The Army Corps, the state, and the federal government settled in 14 days.
Wow.
I called Bob Gaffney up, who was then the county executive. I said, Bob, listen, we're ready to go. He said, what do you mean, Gary? I said, well, hope you're ready for trial because we're ready to go. He says, how could that be? I said, well, Bob, I'm fully funded. He goes, what? I said, yeah, did you read Newsday? We
Right.
created a village last month and we're going to have a full bank account. We're coming at you. And he said, you figured it out, didn't you? I said, yes, I did, Bob. We became a village on November 19th. So now, in the interim of that, I mean, there were some very good people in government. People like Bill Daley from the New York State DEC. People like Frank Santamora from the Army Corps, Cliff Jones. There are really good people, but for that many good people, there's 10 bad ones that would just try to torture us. And so Bill Daley got us 10,000 yards of road base. Because I said, Bill, we need to build a road. He says, look, I think I can get you 10,000 yards of road base onto some program roll. So I said, just get it first. So now we settled the lawsuit in late November, December. I'm telling my residents, we became a village last month. Now we're getting the road's coming down, the state's coming in, they're putting all this road stuff down. We're going to have to build a road for us. Everything's going. By summer, you'll be in your home. Wow. They dropped to 10,000 yards. That is a pile of sand that is so high, probably 90, 100 feet high, 300 feet around in diameter. It was gigantic, blocked the entire front for beginning of the road.
Right.
I mean, it blocked out the sun.
Right.
And so I tell everybody, this is the road base. We're going to get the road built. You'll be able to get to your homes this summer. By next year, we'll have a real road. And off we go. Well, in March, we actually have a village meeting. We get the first budget. We have no idea what it costs to run a village. I know what it costs to run a bar.
Right.
Bob knows it. Bruno knew what it was to run a bowling alley. Bob, we had no idea. Right. So we looked at it and said, look, we can't really kill our residents. Let's charge everybody about $1,000, give us 300 grand. That'll start the village up. And we'll go from there. So we get a budget of $300,000 for the first year. I got this in. Bill Daley calls me up and says, look, I got you the road base. I can do no more. I can't get it put out and built. So I said, well, what do you mean, Bob? Bill, he says, there's no more money in the budget. I said, okay, let's figure this out. So off we go. We got a $300,000 budget. I speak to Joe, what are we gonna do? He says, well, I don't know. We can see what it is to bond. I said, let's put it out to bid. So we put the road project out to bid to take the road base and lay it out across the road. The first bid, I'll never forget opening up the first bid. Opening up the contract, blah, 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 $900,000 just to lay out the sand.
Right.
I mean, I almost collapsed. I said, this is incredible. And the next one's higher and lower. They were all around $900,000. So I said, what am I going to do? I kind of gently on knew Senator Ken LaValle, great New York State senator, a longer sitting senator than I am mayor. And I gave Ken a call and he says, well, Gary, I don't know what we can do for you. There's no money in the budget for this. He goes, but this is right around the time Bill Clinton was decommissioning a lot of military bases across the world. He said, we have a program called the Reutilization Plan for decommissioned military devices. And what that was, where they would take all this military equipment, they brought it up to Seneca, New York, and they would park it, and they would offer it out first to municipalities, then to hospitals, state hospitals, then to schools, and so on down the line until it got auctioned off publicly. He said, look, I'll give you the contact guy's name, drive up to Seneca. I told him a brief history of what you got. He'll get you the equipment you need. Okay, so I call a local contractor. So what do you think I need to do this? He says, you need dump trucks, you need this, you need that, you need. I said, okay, let's see what we got. I called Terry Flynn, the guy up in Seneca. I said, Terry, oh, hi, Mayor Vegliante. Oh, yeah. Senator Laval told me all about you. I said, yeah, we really need your stuff. He goes, well, that's what this is all about, getting it back into the public use for public, right? Let's see what we can do. I said, well, this is what I need. So, okay, Mayor, when are you coming up? I said, I'm coming up next week. I'll have everything ready for you. So I said, look, Terry, okay, I'll be up. Claire and I get in the car. We drive all the way up. I got a little funny story about that, too. I hate to bore you with these stories, but we're driving 9 hours up to Seneca, New York. We get close to the area. You know, there was no GPS at that time. I pull into a gas station to get gas. Claire runs off to the ladies' room. And I'm paying for the gas to a young lady behind the counter. And I said, do you know where the Seneca Holiday Inn is? She goes, oh, yeah. So you go up the road, the first farm on the left, make a right, and go to the rock on the right, and you go up, and you'll see the Holiday Inn there. I said, good, thank you very much. Claire comes walking out of the ladies' room. I said, yeah, do you know if there's a good restaurant or a steakhouse up there in that area? And she looks at Claire and she goes, you're getting dinner too. So drive her to the hotel for she's getting dinner too. So we get, and it was long to make the story as short as I can. We get to Holiday Inn. I called Terry the night before. I said, look, I'd like to meet with you for breakfast, you know, so we could talk a little bit. Being kind of from Queens, the guy said, look, maybe I'll buy a breakfast if he has any other needs. I'll see what that is, because this could be the answer to our prayers. So we having breakfast. He said, oh, Mayor, I got stuff for you. It's going to be great. And as straight as a rail, this guy was really anxious to help us. It was incredible. I pulled it. There was nothing about, you know, my wife needs no hat, you know, none of that. Really straight. We pull into the Seneca military base. There are miles of equipment, miles of trucks. And I'm a real gearhead. I loved it. But there's, I go, okay, Terry goes, look, I got these got dozens of them. He goes, I got these 4 or 5 tons. They're multi-fuel. They're great. There's low hours. My eyes are lighting up. These big, giant military trucks, incredible dumpsters. I climb in a cab and start them up. They're like 200 hours on them. 300, very like new.
Right.
So I go, oh, great, Terry, this is fantastic. He goes, yeah, how many you want? I said, well, I don't know. You know, what do you think of me? He said, I think there'll be around 15. I said, no, 15,000 bucks. Here we go again.
Right.
15,000 bucks. You know, I'll take 2. Okay, good, good. He goes, I got a road grader over here. I'm gonna tell you, 65, somewhere around 65. And, I'll take that one. Now I'm already up to my neck. I figured this is about 100 grand worth of stuff. And so I get to the, and he start writing out. He goes, okay, 3 or 4 trucks by $1,500. I go, wait a minute, what'd you say? 2 trucks by $1,500, that's 3,000. I said, whoa, give me the other 2 over there.
Right. Right.
I go, I want to get it. So we bought all the equipment, basically all the equipment with a road grader from all of these. This equipment came for about less than $12,000.
And you basically, and then you
rebuilt the
brought this
road.
equipment down, and you literally, you and your fellow board members became the contractors.
We certainly did.
Esperanza, this is
Phenomenal, really.
And what's amazing, we really do have to start wrapping this up, but I want to just get into a couple of things before we do, because believe me, this could go on for hours. It's fascinating. But this group of, again, 5 citizens, no background, did all this. And, you know, Esperanza, what's so startling to me, if we even come into present day, you don't hear about Westhampton Dunes anymore because
that way.
they solved it.
Yep.
They fixed the problem. All of the government bungling, and again, this is something I saw in the movie and I read about. If they would have spent what amounted to pennies, they could have done this without any of this. Instead, they spent millions upon millions because of the government mismanagement and everything else. But Gary, if you take us into present day Westhampton Dunes, 2024, what would we see there?
Heaven on earth. We have zero crime, not a successful burglary in the village ever since we've been a village. When prior to that, every house was vandalized or burglarized. We have a really wonderful lifestyle. We're very strong property rights advocates. I stand up for my residents' property values and their rights. Basically, I'll give you the whole thing in a nutshell. In 1992, the entire assessed value of the entire village was less than a few $100,000. Today, it's well over $1 billion.
Wow.
Of course. Yeah.
And
Go ahead, Irwin.
no, I'll, the only other thing I really want to make our audience aware of, amidst all of this negotiation and all of the work that was done, the village of Westhampton Dunes also, and correct me if I'm wrong, Gary, didn't you sort of literally give to the public what amounted to 4 miles of public beachfront?
Absolutely, yes.
That's that in and of itself, and that's where Cupsog State Park is, right?
Right.
County Park.
Yeah.
1,400 parking spots. I've never been to this beach, but Esperanza, it's
And
obviously
the
enormous.
town parking lot in the middle of the village is about 450 spots. But what we did was, as it's different anywhere else in Southampton, all of these homes had riparian deeds from their home right down to the waterfront. But I, as a young kid, always resented the fact I drive down to these beautiful areas, you couldn't access the beach.
Right.
Because it was privately owned.
Right.
So I made a commitment that if the federal government is going to pay for this, even though we had a damage lawsuit against them for $300 million, which we waived completely, I felt that it's necessary and important to allow the public to access this, to make it a valued asset to all of the community, all of the states.
I mean, you can't, Esperanza, and I know you wanted to bring something up, and we're going to get to that in 1 second, but you can't even minimize this, how in the midst of everything they did to create their own village, they kept the general population in mind. And the public was granted access to this. It's unbelievable.
Right. Yeah, it is a situation of greater good, right?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And I know I cut you off before, Esperanza.
No,
Did
it's
you want to bring
fine.
something out?
I'm not even really remembering exactly, but it was along the lines of this, because I was remembering something Gary said earlier about how I think the county would have loved to have just have this revert to just be parkland, right? And it is a question for me as to, the resilience that you have cultivated, if you will, of this barrier island with your efforts is incredible. But, we all know the sea levels rising, storms getting stronger. I mean, I was just curious as to the confidence that you feel that despite the beach being wider now than it ever has been, with not to say there's doom, but just the reality of the future of your community.
Well, let me just say, the Army Corps are experts at what they do, and what they've designed in this beach is a resilient barrier to the mainland. You need this barrier here, whether there are homes on it or not, because it protects not only the bay, the salinity level of the bay, but the actual protection for the coastline of the mainland. This island, we have sustained many substantial storms for the last 30 years. We've had virtually no damage to one structure in this, other than wind damage, broken windows. But there's been no damage to ourselves, to our community, and the beach is bigger than ever because the Army Corps designed it to function properly.
Wow.
We naturally now get the flow of sand from east to west, and when the westerly winds blow in, it actually builds up the sand. So even when Sandy devastated east and west of us tremendously, we had some sand loss and we had some beach loss, but within months it was back to normal.
Fantastic.
John Crooked does a great job.
That's
You have
astonishing.
to invest in sand management. You have to invest in maintaining barrier islands. But for every dollar spent on maintenance, far more money returns to the community in tax dollars.
Right.
It's a tremendous ratio. I think it's $1 to $6.
I think we have to leave it there. And again, this is Esperanza, by the way, this is the longest podcast in the history of Our Hamptons
Really?
podcast. Yes,
Oh my
I've been timing
goodness.
it. So to our audience, this one went about 45 minutes. Again, it could go 3 hours and 45 minutes. There's that much to say, but I just want to close this episode. First of all, I want to give props to the Yale Nelson documentary, Incredible Journey, the story of Westhampton Dunes. To our audience, this story will very much in front of the public 30 years ago, has been invisible of late. And that's really a testament to the job that this mayor, and I have no skin in this game. I don't live in this community. It's just an observation of what Mayor Gary Vegliante and his team of really regular citizens accomplished here. It is an unbelievable story. And Esperanza, a great story to start our season 5 with.
It is. Thank you really for Irwin for finding this just astonishing. That's the only word I can think of.
It is. And Gary, we're going to reserve the right to call you back and maybe do a part 2 to this, because trust me, our Hamptons podcast audience, as long as this podcast was, we could talk for another hour about this, and we may do that again in the future. We may reach out to Gary, but to Gary Vegliante, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, guys. It was a pleasure doing this.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Esperanza,
Thank you.
as always, a pleasure.
Have a great summer.
Yes,
Yeah,
we're gonna try. Thanks so much for joining us. New episodes of Our Hamptons are released every other Tuesday. Find them wherever you get your podcasts.